So what percentage of adults think children behave like animals? It's 54%.
And welcome back to today's Wright Stuff with our all-star panel of Armando Iannucci, Terry Christian and Yasmin Brown. We've all been arguing about hairbrushes still, but we've got to get our heads into a new phrase now. Still to come. Hands up, who misses Tony Blair? 027 173 5555 is the number to dial if you do, or indeed, if you don't. But first, are you Ephebiphobic? Do you suffer from an irrational fear of young people, if indeed it is an irrational fear? Shadow Home Secretary Chris Grayling reckons our society is becoming increasingly afraid of its own children. And the psychologist Tanya Bryant voiced similar concerns last month. Adults are becoming more and more suspicious and frightened of young people. It's this fear, she says, that leads many of us to demonise all young kids as feral, and children in turn will play up to that wayward reputation. It's this combination, she says, of fear and misunderstanding that's led to Britain's youngsters being dubbed the unhappiest and unhealthiest in the world. Now, I have had the occasional attack of Ephebiophobia. I've told you before, I was walking the dog one night, I saw a big huddle of hoodies up ahead and started to think about crossing the road to avoid them for no reason whatsoever other than my own paranoia when they started shouting, "Yo, the Wright Stuff!" They turned out to be really friendly, really good fun, and I felt like a big fat fool, not for the first time. But what if I had been a vulnerable old lady walking her dog? Now, surely she could be forgiven for feeling a bit paranoid. And then again, this fear of young people isn't new, is it? I mean, ever since the term teenagers was coined in the 50s, adults have been scared of teddy boys, mods, rockers, punks, skinheads, crusties, hoodies, and so on. And in fact, even as far back as the 4th century BC, Plato was bemoaning young people's lack of respect for their elders and habits of rioting in the streets. But maybe Grayling is right, and our paranoia is starting to get out of control. What do we have to do to cure ourselves? Do young people themselves have to play a part in that treatment too? The trouble is, for me, it's stories like that of James Strayton, the Cheshire man, beaten to death outside his own home by two lads, I think they were 19 at the time, who tried to break into his house. Do little to assuage my fear of young people. What about you, Terry?
Again, it's a very sweeping generalisation. I mean, if young people gather in sufficient numbers, they sometimes float between irritating and dangerous, don't they? But in general, I think it's always been the same way. You know, when I was
Do you think
a kid,
it's getting worse? More paranoid today?
I think that the problem is, if a kid's cheeky and you collar him now, you're likely to be the one that's kind of taken away by the police. Yeah. If there's any police
but
around
do you think
that aren't suspended or resigned through stupidity. But, you know, yeah, people are overly frightened of them, and it empowers the kids. But this is nothing new. I mean, you were talking about the mods and the teddy boys. I was reading a book recently about the gangs of Manchester, the scuttling gangs in the 1870s, 1880s, 1890s. And they'd have, like, mass fights street by street. You know, the whole neighbourhood would be in absolute fear of them. The police were scared of them. And these were kids aged between 14 and 19 in the main. And they'd fight with belt buckles, knives, razors, all sorts. We're nothing like that. There's a certain amount of paranoia to it, and nobody ever talks to those kids. What do they want? And they had all these massive problems with the scuttling gangs back in the late 19th century. And they said, what do? Do we put them in prison? They were sending them, you know, 5 years hard labour. They were saying that they could birch them, but they couldn't birch them unless you stole something. So, you know, violence in the street wasn't a birching offence. So they wanted to bring back the birch. The only way they got rid of them was they formed football clubs. Do you know, like Manchester City were formed to get rid of those.
I was just going to say, youth clubs and youth work have all had budgets cut over the last 20-odd years.
That was it, and there is nowhere for them to go. I mean, I live in a very nice middle-class area. There is absolutely nothing around there for young people to go. And, you know, you get all this stuff about grassroots sport, and you know, you have people like your Andy Burnhams and Tessa Jow before that, spending all our grassroots sports money building a stadium at Wembley that was about 5 times more expensive than it should have been built.
Well said.
Right? And if you want to even play football now, it will cost you £35 a month or something like that. So nothing is for free anymore. Everything costs money, and if your family haven't got money, then what else do? You go onto the streets.
Yasmin, do you have a Ephebiophobia?
No. But I do think people do in this country. I don't think we're very nice to our children, actually, and that's been very typically British for a very long time. And And you're right that the lack of facilities, youth clubs, centres where they can hang out are non-existent. They're non-existent where I am in Ealing. So what do they do? What do they do? What do young people do when they want to get together? They hang out in public spaces. It's their space too, you know. Mm-hmm. It is their space.
And there is that sense, I think, if you expect the worst out of people, you will get the worst out of people. You know, I mean, if you're imposing, if you're telling that whole generation that we don't expect much from them, and
there's
that
been
we're
a lot
scared
of it going on as well, then, the hoodies, and you're not allowed into shopping centres. I think
it just sort of feeds it, really. If you're suspicious of someone, that person is naturally going to act slightly odd towards you because they can detect the suspicion.
And actually, they're babies. You know, there's a group of young Asian boys with hoodies looking very dangerous, and they were smoking. So I became an auntie and said, "Why are you smoking? Why are you smoking? Shall I go and tell your mother?" And they were, "Sorry, auntie. Sorry, auntie." So you have to kind of...
I mean, I think the thing that frightens me is bad parents, you know, as well, you know, because, you know, it sounds horribly old-fashioned, but, you know, you would expect, you know, kids to be brought up, you know, with a bit of kind of discipline, a bit of responsibility and all the rest of it. And I think there's less and less of that going on nowadays.
Just before we go to the calls, Amanda, I mean, how are you going to reverse the trend?
Well, I remember when we had our first kid and various people, you know, other parents give you bits of advice and so on. And I remember one thing that struck with me is a mother said, which was, you must teach your kids to learn how to be bored. And what that is, you know, don't feel you have to supply them with, like, if it's the weekend, get lots of games out and then take them to swimming, and then they've got to learn how to do something in the 3 hours that they've got when you're busy doing something. And it's that thing of developing the skill and the habit of being able to do something constructive with free time. And because, you know, we've got into this habit of inflicting a timetable on them over the weekend and keeping them in and wherever, then when they are outside, they are.
Do you think this trend for keeping kids in has a part to play? Because, I mean, that's a new development, isn't it?
I think so, because it does mean that, you know, because so many kids are indoors, it does mean you are suspicious of the ones that are outside. You think, why have they been let out? You know, what's going on?
They must be up to bad.
Must be up to no good. They're actually off to buy the Daily Telegraph and, you know,
dear.
Do the crossword.
And become civil servants.
Become civil servants.
And then, Yasmin, do you go with Terry that, I mean, I think you made a very, very strong case that, you know, if it took the formation of football clubs, activities to get the scuttlers off the street, and we've spent the last 20 years shutting down youth clubs, is that where we need to go back to?
Yes, and libraries. I mean, libraries became... You know, the British Library used to be a terribly exclusive club.
Yes.
It opened up, and if you go into the British Library, it's full of young people.
Yep.
It's fantastic. They meet, they have and what everybody's complaining, you know, it's not like it used to be that they're coming in. It's a wonderful space for them to be in. It's a library, for God's sake. They don't want them there.
Don't think it's going to stop gangs recruling kids, really, you know.
No, we're talking about people, kids in public spaces.
You could have the Milton gang, the Shakespeare gang, and fight it out amongst themselves.
But it's good, you see.
Over paradise.
And we need to open up those spaces and clubs.
There's a fight in the park tomorrow. Fiction versus non-fiction.
Absolutely. OK. Well, let's find out if many of you are ephebiphobic, and also if anybody has any other ideas about how we may cure it. So who's on the phone, Stanley?
OK, our first caller says she is one. It's Gillian on line 1.